members and guests to our annual meeting. This is our 7th annual meeting, and we're very pleased that everybody could come today. We were debating, the board was debating for the last few months whether we should have another virtual meeting like last year, or whether we could risk having an in-person meeting. And certainly in-person is a lot more exciting and a lot more fun. So we're so glad that so many of you were able and chose to join us today. Thank you. And I'd also like to say a thank you to our business partner, Agway of Cape Cod, who is sponsoring our annual meeting today, and the owners, Josh Weil and Jessica Thomas. And now I'd like to call this meeting to order and begin by reminding everyone of our mission, which is to protect the health, beauty, and enjoyment of Brewster's ponds. And Brewster has over 80 ponds. So, reviewing the agenda for today, we're going to start with an introduction to the board, 2021 highlights, a financial summary, acceptance of the 2020 minutes, annual meeting minutes, board elections, and then we get to the really fun part, the Splash Award, and finally, the best part, our guest speaker, Brain Baumgaertel. Did I say that better? Okay, good. So I'm going to introduce the board, and if the board members could just sort of stand up and wave. I think I introduced myself. I'm Susan Bridges, the current president of the board. Conrad Schultz is our vice president and chair of communications. Okay. Rob Condon is our treasurer. Nancy Ortiz is our clerk, and Nancy and her husband Tony are also kind of the assistant treasurers when Rob's not here. Marty Burke is the chair of citizen science and also communications. Membership, sorry. Marty does an amazing job with membership. Cameron Ferguson is the chair of our volunteer committee. Wayne Jenkins is the chair of events. Wayne could not be here today because he has a wedding. That kind of happens on Saturdays in the summer. Marcia Kelb is the chair of our Pond Education Committee. And I just want to say that Sue Searles had been our chair until this winter. Sue is here also. Sue left the board because she actually moved away. But Marcia thankfully took over and is doing a great job and hasn't skipped a beat, so that's good. Mary Matterstock is helping Marty with membership. She is helping with events. And with Marcia together, they've created a scholarship committee, which is also wonderful, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Gwen Pelletier. Gwen has been on so many committees and has chaired so many of them, done so much work. She is our resident historian, the person we go to learn things about the town of Brewster, the Brewster Ponds Coalition, Robert's Rules. I mean, Gwen really watches my back. And then finally, Bruce Warren, who is the chair of our Pond Outreach Committee. So thank you, hard-working board. So now I'd like to go over some of the highlights of this year, beginning with the events. We began in the spring with a virtual pond summit, and if you missed the event, you can see the video on our website. We had Nancy Leland was our speaker. She spoke about the cyanobacteria food web study that she began last summer. and is continuing this summer at Walker's Pond and Lower Mill Pond. The study is being funded by the Brewster Ponds Coalition. Then, later in the spring, we had Beautify Brewster. Thank you for everyone that came out and helped us pick up trash. We had Brewster in Bloom. It was a very cold day in front of the library, but we met some people that were interested in our mission, and we even got a few new members, so that was successful. We participated in Conservation Day. The Brewster Conservation Trust invited us, to join them, and this year the theme was actually pond health. So we were very pleased to help with that, and it was really more than just Conservation Day. It was Conservation Week with in-person and virtual events. Our pond education team did a little pond field trip, which was a lot of fun, and we had a special volunteer who came as Shelley the Turtle to the kickoff meeting at Drummer Boy Park, and Shelley was able to really attract a lot of attention. There's nothing like a great big turtle waving at you to bring people in. Also this year, for the first time, the Brewster Ponds Coalition participated in the Hydrangea Festival. And this was both a fundraising event and an educational event for us. Cal and Karen Moody very graciously allowed us to use their gorgeous garden that has a lovely view of Blueberry Pond. And a couple of reasons why we were particularly interested in the garden is that they have an alternative septic system, and they are located very close to the stormwater basins that were built and a rain garden to protect Blueberry Pond. So that was really wonderful, and John O'Reilly of J.M. O'Reilly Engineering came and spoke both days at the garden to anyone that wanted to hear about alternative septic and stormwater remediation. Oh, also, Cal keeps bees. And, wait, I gotta flip. Also, Suzanne Boas has a beautiful garden here in Brewster near Long Pond, and she was wonderful. She split the proceeds of her garden between the Brewster Ponds Coalition and the Cape Cod Hydrangea Festival. Society, yeah. So that was really great. So then, we've also had some other activities that were really more designed to see everyone, talk to them about our mission, and just are a lot of fun. They started with Marty, who has organized several bike rides. There have been 2, and there are 2 more coming up. Marty and his group ride on the bike trail, but they ride by the ponds. Also, Gwen is hosting 2 hikes. The first hike took the Baker's Pond Trail. I think that was great. And then, Gwen, you have another one coming up later in the fall, I think in September. And finally, our business partner, Safari, has partnered with us to host 4 very successful eco paddles. The first one we hosted with the Brewster Conservation Trust, and the group paddled from Upper Mill Pond down to Walker's Pond following the annual spring herring run. It was a very informative, educational trip. I think everybody had a great time. The second was at Long Pond, and there are 2 more coming up later this month, Upper Mill Pond, and then in September, Safari's taking a group to Paynes Creek and Quivet Creek. So if you're interested in any of these future activities, please go to our website and sign up. We'd love to see you. And thank you to everyone that supported these events, both as volunteers and participants. Now I'd like to talk about citizen science. The citizen science program is in its 7th year. It is a signature program of the Brewster Ponds Coalition. It's led by Marty, and he has 45 volunteers that are testing 8 ponds every other week, May through October this summer and fall. Water samples are taken and delivered to the lab at APCC, which is the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, where they are analyzed for levels of cyanobacteria. The findings, low, moderate, or high, are reported back to the Brewster Ponds Coalition and then to the Department of Natural Resources and the Board of Health. Marty has worked very closely with Amy Van Hoen of the Department of Health to develop a protocol for reporting and posting unhealthy levels of cyanobacteria. When high levels of cyanobacteria are found or bloom, warnings are posted for 2 weeks until the levels drop and remain low for 2 weeks. Marty also alerts all the neighborhood groups surrounding the affected ponds. In addition to the 18 ponds that are part of the rotation this summer, Marty has tested several other ponds in Brewster when neighbors have called to say that they think there might be a problem with their pond. So far this summer, warnings have been posted at Walker's Pond, Cliff Pond, Seymour Pond, and just this past week at Schoolhouse Pond. Obviously, this is not good news, but the good news is that the Brewster Ponds Coalition is monitoring the situation and working very closely with the Department of Health to warn the public. Also, as part of the Citizen Science Program, the Brewster Ponds Coalition provided a grant to the University of New Hampshire, again this year, to continue research of cyanobacteria toxins in pond aerosols. This is being done at Walker's and Lower Mill Ponds, and there's a feature article about this study in our 2021 copy of Ripples, which if you haven't seen it, you can pick it up on the table out there. I forgot to mention also about citizen science. All citizen science research reports are available on our website under programs and under citizen science. So, the Pond Education Program, now in its 4th year, is a program for Brewster School children in the 2nd and 5th grades. The program provides 2nd and 5th grade teachers with grade-appropriate pond kits, which include curriculum guides, lesson plans, classroom activities, and reference materials. Also, in the past, the program always ended with an in-person field trip to a pond, which included a pond creature puppet show, which the children really enjoyed. Then last year, and again this year because of COVID, the field trips had to be canceled. So in response, our pond education group, I think we have 10 volunteers on that committee, created 7 original videos to be used by the teachers in the classroom. They can also be used by parents at home since they are now available on our website. But the videos include a virtual pond trip, a puppet show for 2nd graders, a very cool rap puppet show for 5th graders, and 4 book readings by local authors Susan Bauer and Heidi Klemmer. So I urge you to go online and look at these. They're really great. Oh, and there's Shelley. Turtle. This year alone, 198 Brewster school children utilized the program. Also related to education, for the first year, the Brewster Ponds Coalition created a scholarship for high school seniors, and we presented the first award to Nauset Regional High School student Bennett Hartley. Bennett, by the way, was the young volunteer who edited the author book readings for us this year. So, moving along to outreach and partnerships. I would say that pond outreach and helping to remediate ponds is definitely one of the most important things that we can do at the Brewster Ponds Coalition. I mean, it's wonderful to educate people, but really what we're trying to do is remediate these ponds. So this spring, we created a grant program to provide matching funds for remediation and research projects. After creating a crisis fund, all donations not needed to cover our operating expenses are automatically put toward the grant program each month. For projects that qualify, the Brewster Ponds Coalition will provide funding for 1/3 of the project. The pond group has to raise the first 2/3 of the cost of the project. We'll provide up to $10,000 a year for up to 3 years. To qualify, a project must have all the required permits and reflect our mission. So for example, we'll assist with stormwater basins and rain gardens, but not picnic tables and floats. Just in case you were wondering. This summer, the Brewster Ponds Coalition is working with several pond groups, along with the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Public Works, and Conservation, on several pond remediation projects which will take advantage of this grant program. Current projects include the plant harvesting at Elbow Pond, repairing the aeration system at Canoe Pond, and working on stormwater remediation projects at 2 Upper Mill Pond locations and 1 at Slough Pond. And finally, the Brewster Ponds Coalition has recently launched a bioremediation research project, which is being led by Tom Vaughton, past president of the Brewster Ponds Coalition. There are 3 phases to this project. In the first phase, Tom is organizing a group of qualified volunteer researchers to review bioremediation projects being tried in various places all around the world. Hopefully their findings will lead to phase 2, a pilot project here at a pond in Brewster. The pilot will allow us to develop direct experience, quantify results, and further determine the feasibility for application on a larger scale. This would be phase 3. And now onto the real business part of this meeting. Rob, would you like to come up and review our financial summary, please?
We only have one slide.
Right.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is a very brief summary comparing the fiscal year 2020 compared to year-to-date July. I just want to preface this by saying that I inherited a very nice financial system from Tom Vaughton, who was practicing as treasurer and president, and so I really had an easy startup. So thank you, Tom. In 2020, our total income was $55,000, and so far our income this year in 7 months is $39,000. The expenses compared were $28,000 in 2020 and $14,500 year-to-date here. The key categories of our administration, programs and projects, education, outreach, and fundraising. Administration is composed of the costs of insurance, the cost of accounting, the cost of submitting tax filings, and basically the programs and projects. Walker Pond was about $2,000 this year. Lower Mill Pond about $1,000, APCC grant of $1,000. So it's money that's being really, really well spent, and I really want to emphasize projects, and with a grant program, we really want that to take off. Right now we have approximately $45,000. I'll call it excess, but it's really project. When I use the word excess, that is in addition to the operating budget of about $37,000 a year as the operating budget. We have a crisis reserve of $21,000. That's in case all of a sudden there's no more donors. It's not going to happen. But anyways, we've set up these reserves, and each month we report on them. And each month we're seeing an increase in the amount of funds that are available for the grant program. Again, right now it's about $45,000 available in the grant program. Our unrestricted cash at the December 31st of last year was $87,000. And you can see the growth that we've had right now. We have unrestricted cash of $111,000. Unrestricted meaning that is the BPC's bank book. The restricted funds right now consist of the Blueberry, Souls, and Elbow. Those two organizations have the restricted fund, and we take in money and put it into that restricted fund, and it's used only for those projects. The unrestricted cash of that is, as I was saying, is unrestricted and can be used for any project that meets the grant requirements that Susan discussed. Summary, that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Now, I need a motion to accept the financial summary for 2020. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, also, we need a motion to accept the minutes of the 2020 annual board meeting. There were minutes on the back table, but I'm sure you all read them last year after Glenn wrote them for us. So I need a motion to accept the minutes for last. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, now moving on to annual elections. In accordance with the bylaws of the Brewster Ponds Coalition, we elect the directors each summer at our annual meeting. The board of directors has a staggered 3-year term to ensure the continuity of leadership. And we're all in different classes. So board members ending their 3-year term this year include Marty Burke, Wayne Jenkins, Nancy Ortiz, and Gwen Pelletier. Next year, ending 3-year terms are me, Rob, and Conrad, and then the following year, Cameron, Mary, and Bruce, and Marcia's just getting started, so her 3-year term is not over until 2024. Everyone can serve up to 2 consecutive regular terms, in other words, 6 years. And we nominate our officers at the first board meeting following the annual meeting. By the way, Gwen's at the end of her second 3-year term. So Gwen is leaving the board after this year, and Wayne Jenkins, who is the only one on the board who is actually not retired, is also not signing up again at this time, but he says he's going to join us later after he does retire, which would be great. So we need to vote on this. The proposed slate of nominees, we are proposing to re-elect Marty Burke and Nancy Ortiz to 3-year terms ending in 2024, and to elect Marcia Kelp to a 3-year term ending in 2024. The following slate is also proposed for election as members of the nominating committee. And it's the same committee as this year and last year, Conrad, Marty, and me. So, hold on. So, could I have a motion, please, to re-elect Marty Burke and Nancy Ortiz to 2nd terms?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and thank you. And elect Marcia Kelp to a 3-year term.
So moved.
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, and we also have to vote for the nominating committee. So that's Conrad, Marty, and me.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great, thank you very much. So that concludes the business portion of our meeting. Now on to the fun part. Conrad's going to thank our outgoing board members.
Thanks, Susan. By now, you all know that if you think of a board member for the Brewster Ponds Coalition as somebody who attends a lot of meetings and votes on things and goes home, you're wrong. The Brewster Ponds Coalition board members are very actively involved in various action groups and teams. They're always hands-on, they're always learning, always growing and contributing, and that's one of the most fun things about being on the board. So any of you want to talk to me about that later on, I'll be here. We'd like to honor 3 of our exiting board members this morning who've made a big difference in this organization and the Brewster community, and have helped to grow us from a small band of pond muckers, as Karen Malchus Benjamin used to call us, into the effective organization that we are today. Wayne Jenkins, who's not here today, couldn't make it, as Susan mentioned. He first stopped by our booth at Brewster Conservation Day about 4 or 5 years ago and made the mistake of offering his hand and help. And it took about a year or 2 of conversations with Wayne, because he is a working person and these are very active board decisions, to join the board. But he's been a great contributor to our group. I wish he were here today to hear these words. But he led our events team for several years. And during these COVID times, he put together a couple of virtual meetings which were really important to us to be able to communicate with everybody. And then most recently, as Susan mentioned, he helped write the pond remediation grant program and how that would work. So we're very grateful to Wayne. He also helped with several stormwater remediation projects. He has an environmental engineering background, which is interesting as well. So we're going to say thanks to him. We have something special for him to give him the next time we see him, and we'll save that for a minute. The next person we'd like to thank is Susan Day Searles, who is here right now. Susan, will you come up for a minute? Come on up, Susan. Susan stepped into some very big shoes when she came onto this board.
Boots, big boots.
That's true.
Waders.
Big boots, right?
Waders.
She took over for Karen Malchus Benjamin, our first president, who designed the first pond education program for children. And Sue's background is in education and administration. She was just perfect for that position and did so much else for us. She really grew this program, the pond education program for children, into something really large. There's been over 33 volunteers who have participated in the program. Over, I think 600 is the number, 600 Brewster school children have participated in it since its inception. And Sue did much more than that. She helped organize our Beautify Brewster Days. She participated in many walks and paddles, our strategic planning. The list goes on, and I won't go through them all. But and importantly, participated in the town of Brewster's 2018 visioning process, which was led by Hal Minus, who's here today somewhere. Hal, raise your hand. Great job, Hal. So Sue's leaving the board now, and we have something special for she and Lynn to enjoy in your travels. And thank you so much. Thank you. Many of you know Gwen Pelletier. Come on up, Gwen. Many of you know Gwen from her many years of service in the Community Development Partnership and the housing nonprofit sector, and Audubon and Wellfleet as well. And Gwen is a solid, experienced nonprofit leader who brought her knowledge to the BPC at a very critical early stage, actually our founding. That's pretty early. She helped write our organizational and founding documents and created our 501c3. And not only that, but she served as clerk on our executive board for many years. And there's really not a single facet of this organization that Gwen has not been involved with. She led walks, she did talks, paddles, children's and adult education, beautified Brewster teams, taken minutes, collected membership mail and payments, and have been involved in our strategic planning. And if you want to think of Gwen, just think of the Swiss Army knife. She can do it all. We wish you many years of ongoing paddling and happy walking through Brewster and beyond. And we have a small gift of our appreciation for you, Gwen. Thank you so much.
If I get near a microphone, I have to use it. So I want to say thank you to all of you, because you're what has made Brewster Ponds, you're what's made Brewster Ponds a success. The board couldn't have done what we've done without all of the volunteer efforts that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. And congratulations, Sue and Gwen, and thank you very much for being on our board. So next, the Splash Award. So if Marty will come up, please, to present the Splash Award.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people show up on this warm, warm morning. Thank you to Susan, to Conrad, and to everyone else that's spoken so far. Of course, Gwen and the exiting board members, Susan and Wayne. And Rob. Where's Rob? Raise your hand. Rob, thank you. It's always nice to follow the accountant. When the accountant has good news to tell you. It's a wonderful thing when your accountant gives you good news. So thank you for that, Rob. So after Rob's good news presentation, all I have to do is stand here and say thank you again and to hand out the Splash Award. So I've got a fairly easy job, I think. Also, I think, since this is the thank you part of the meeting, it's really important to thank Nancy Ortiz and Tony, I don't know where Tony is, Tony Ortiz, for joining Rob's accounting department this past winter when Rob was wintering in New Orleans. So Nancy and Tony stood up and gathered all the mail-in donations, recorded them, deposited them, went to the bank, back and forth, and kept things running with fantastic Swiss clockwork. So thank you to Nancy and to Tony. In a small group and a small board, everyone needs to chip in at different times, so they really stood up. And for those of you who don't know it, Tony Ortiz was an originating member and a founding member and one of the first board members, at least on the first board that existed. So Tony, again, thank you for all of your service. And I was just wondering if maybe you might think of coming out of retirement. Conrad will talk to you about that later. So anyways, on to the Splash Award. This is BPC's biggest award. It's given annually to a participating volunteer who makes a big splash by giving really their most valuable asset. And that most valuable asset, even for many of us who are retirees, is time. And so this volunteer has given time over many, many years to this organization. And I feel that charitable giving is a personal act of generosity and kindness, and it's important that we give to organizations and causes that we think are important. So I thank everyone in this room, along with the Splash Award winner, for doing that. This special award has been given to special charitable people over in the past. And so these special people are, in 2017, Nancy Gustafson Smith was the initial award winner. In 2018, it was Jim Holland. In 2019, Jan McGann was the award winner. And in 2020, Karen Malkus Benjamin. So talk about a group of really, really kind, charitable people, and they'd be terrific to have dinner with. So they'd be great at a dinner party, I think. So the award winner this year has been involved in the citizen science program, the Cornerstone program, really, since the beginning. In 2017, when the cyanobacteria monitoring program was born, this individual, along with Karen Malkus Benjamin, were, in my opinion, the key architects of building the entire BPC program. And at the time, in 17, this volunteer was one of 6 citizen science volunteers. And you heard Susan say that we have 45 to 50, and growing. So the work continues on. In 2019, the award winner was one of 7 volunteers involved in the first ever aerosol toxin research program that took place in Brewster, the first in the county, the first in the state, and as far as we know, the first in the Northeast, the aerosol program. So it was groundbreaking. This individual also contributes above and beyond the normal volunteer effort by sampling and recording data at the assigned pond site on schedule, then carrying the samples to a home-built laboratory to analyze for toxins, and then records and reports the results back to us at BPC, as well as to our science partners. Over the last couple of weeks, I've talked to a number of people who know this individual pretty well, and the words, they didn't all say it the same way, but the words that come back to describe this person is earnest, serious and zealous in intention, purpose, and effort. And those qualities are really important, I think, in the citizen science role. To me, what shows through when you're with this person is a depth of sincerity of feeling and kindness. And I think at this point in time, we could all use a lot of kindness in the world. So I really feel that when I'm with this person. So this year's award winner has graced the front page of our local newspaper and was the cover boy of this year's Ripples magazine. The Splash Award winner, Chuck Medansky.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Marty, and congratulations, Chuck. And now I'm very happy to introduce Brain Baumgaertel, who is the director of the Massachusetts Alternative Septic Test Center and is a senior environmental specialist at the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. He's a registered sanitarian, environmental health specialist, Title V soil evaluator, and wastewater treatment plant operator. Originally from New York, Brian has lived on Cape Cod for 15 years and currently resides in Mashpee, where he serves as chair of the local board of health. Brian, do you want people to hold questions till the end?
Sure,
Yeah, if you could hold any questions you have until the end, I think that would be great. So, welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much. All right, so can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, very good. So, MASSTC, 20 years of backyard innovations. So obviously we sort of live in a world of excess right now. We've got excess carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and we've got excess plastic in our soil, in our oceans, in our ponds, and in our food, unfortunately. It gets in our rainwater too. Got a lot of pharmaceuticals, personal care products, flame retardants, pesticides, some nice chemicals that make the eggs slip off your pan so easily too. It's kind of, you know, not difficult to kind of get down when you think about those things. We have excess nitrogen in our saltwater embayments and excess phosphorus in our freshwater ponds, and these things are really the result of an unbounded growth of our species that tends not to do things in moderation. But I'm not really here today to expound on the problems or raise awareness of the issues. I think we have enough awareness. I think this group kind of exemplifies that. We need more action. And again, I think if there's a group that exemplifies action, it's this one. So what I'm going to talk to you today about are solutions that have been developed at one of the places on the Cape that's near and dear to me. It's this little 2-acre facility on the southern end of Joint Base Cape Cod called MASSTC. Some people call it MASSTC, I call it MASSTC. It's the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. And really what it is I like to say it's the nation's premier, maybe that's a little bit presumptive, but the nation's premier third-party testing and research facility for innovative alternative septic system treatment technologies. That's a bit of a mouthful for what it actually is. And I just want to kind of ask a question. How many people here have a septic system? Yeah, pretty much everybody? Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So everybody kind of has this good sense for what a septic system is. Well, an alternative septic system kind of takes what you have in your own backyard, adds some additional components, and hopefully gets some better treatment out of it. And the point of this facility is to find those technologies, vet those technologies, because there's a lot of salesmanship that goes into septic systems, as what might sound kind of funny. But to vet those technologies, and we also do a lot of original research at our facility as well, to try to answer some of the questions that are out there about septic systems and their impacts on the environment and how we can actually do better with them. So some of the ongoing research at MASSTC and at Barnstable County really as a whole. Obviously we look at nutrient removal, so we talk a lot about nitrogen. We talk a little bit less about phosphorus because I think it's the less glamorous issue. I think a lot of times we put what I like to call nitrogen goggles on and kind of ignore the rest of the issues. We look at contaminants of emerging concern, so those things are your pharmaceuticals, personal care products, so those are like your soaps and creams and all those other materials that we use on a daily basis to take care of ourselves. Things like PFOS, PFAS, which are perfluorinated compounds, those the forever compounds that you probably read about in the news recently. They're quite insidious compounds. We look at things like pathogen removal, so bacteria, viruses. Of course, we've talked enough about viruses over the last 18 or 19 months. We look at water reuse, which might sound funny that we kind of live in the Northeast. There's a whole lot of water here. But I think water reuse is something that we really need to take a look at when we consider it in the scope of climate change and everything else that's going on. Getting a second use out of our water wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. We look at constructed and floating wetlands, utilizing some nuisance plants and algae as potential means of treatment. So, algae, of course, is a major concern in our ponds, but there's also some aquatic plants that grow that we might consider nuisances, generally speaking, but actually can possibly do some work for us. Things like water hyacinth, things like duckweed, which is actually the smallest flowering species in the entire world. It's probably right in your ponds right now. You could go out and find it. That's a species called Wolfia. We do a lot with IA system management, so not only putting innovative alternative septic systems out into the world, but how do we manage them to make sure that they're functioning? Because obviously they're much more complex than flush it, goes into a septic tank, into a leach field, and you don't really have to think about it. There's a lot of pumps and things that go along with it that have to be properly managed to make sure that those systems are functioning properly. We look at financing options for these things, so we have what's called a community septic management loan program that's available to people to replace their failing septic systems. It's a public health program that we started about 2007. And that program provides low-interest loans to anybody who might have a failing septic system. The great thing about that program is we don't do any credit checks. You pretty much apply and get the loan and get your system replaced because we want to make sure that the systems are getting replaced. We're also starting to look a bit at solids handling, or what we like to call sludge in the wastewater business. And sludge is something that's produced not only in a septic system and a septic tank at the bottom of the tank. You've probably, having septic systems, have had a guy come and pump out. I don't know if you've wondered where that material goes after the guy leaves your yard, but chances are he goes to some facility where it gets dumped in probably some sort of a wastewater treatment facility, gets combined with the wastewater sludge, and then all that has to go somewhere. For a long time, that would go off Cape to probably a landfill or an incineration facility. But thanks to PFAS and PFAS, a lot of the Northeast states don't take those materials anymore. So actually, we're shipping most of this stuff out to the middle of the country. Ohio is one of the destinations for the sludge coming from your septic tank and from the wastewater treatment plants in the area. As an example, the Barnstable wastewater treatment plant produces 18,000 gallons of sludge every single day. And the thing about that is when we dewater that sludge, we're getting it down to about 5% solids. So dewatering is kind of not really a great term for that. But for the most part, that means we're shipping water to Ohio and dumping it in a landfill. So we're starting to take at sludge solids handling because as EPA really starts to look finally at regulating PFAS compounds, a lot of those places where we put this material will stop accepting this material. So I like to say I patented this new term. I got a copyright on this. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to go ahead and call it Sludge-mageddon right now because we're going to be up to our knees in it pretty soon if we don't figure out what we're going to be doing with it. But what I'm really mostly here to talk about today is phosphorus, being this a pond coalition. And phosphorus is really the cause of the cultural eutrophication of your ponds. Those algae blooms that you're getting and some of the other problems related to that are a direct result of phosphorus loading over a number of decades into the ponds. And I don't know, this is one of my favorite Christmas movies. This is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Phosphorus is the gift that keeps on giving the whole year round. So the science, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the science. As I had said, I'm here to really talk about the solutions, but there are a couple good papers here that I would recommend if you're interested in the science of phosphorus in ponds. Two of these papers at the top were written by David Schindler. David did a lot of research up in Canada looking at phosphorus and nitrogen in actual ponds and controlling the levels of those things. And what his conclusion really is that phosphorus is the limiting nutrient. Some folks will say that there's been some debate in more recent times that if we remove the nitrogen, maybe we can control the phosphorus. But if you look at his research and the results of that research, it's pretty strongly correlated with the phosphorus. And phosphorus control is the best way to mitigate the algae blooms that we're seeing. This is also a good book, Phosphorus Control and Policies and Strategies by Alexandra Drizo. A lot of great reference material there in that book. So if you have a snoozer of a Sunday afternoon in the middle of winter and you want to learn about phosphorus, here's your reading list. So controlling phosphorus is really a multi-pronged approach. We can't, I'm going to talk about septic systems today, but that's only one piece of the puzzle when it comes to controlling phosphorus. We have to talk about source reduction. So we're looking at, implementing robust fertilizer restrictions, land use practices, septic system upgrades and sewering where we can do it. We're looking at doing mitigation, so constructed wetlands and doing stormwater management projects. And then you can look at in-pond removal, things like dredging, which kind of scares me. I don't like dredging, but it's on the table, I guess. Chemical additions, so things like aluminum additions are some possibilities. There are things like floating wetlands, aquatic plant species that I spoke about a little bit earlier. And then there are some of the alternative techniques that are out there. On the Mashpee Board of Health, we met this week, and we were presented with a product, and I forget the name, but it's essentially some sort of a cellular foam finger material with some activated carbon in biochar that's purporting to remove phosphorus from a pond. We were talking about it in the context of Santuit Pond in Mashpee, which if you look at the sort of Google map of Cape Cod and you look in Mashpee and you see all these nice dark ponds and lakes and you can't find Santuit Pond because it's green and it blends in with the trees. So we're looking at that as a possibility for Santuit Pond. Santuit Pond isn't a kettle hole pond, it's an impoundment that was created in conjunction with the cranberry industry. So it's on average about 9 feet deep. So it's got some challenges and it can't be looked at in the same way you would look at a kettle hole pond like a lot of the ones in Brewster are. So, getting on to septic systems. So traditional septic systems really only have a finite capacity to remove phosphorus. So basically what's happening in your traditional septic system is that the phosphorus is going into the soil portion of your system, and it's adhering to the soil particles that are in the ground. And it kind of just gets stopped there. It doesn't get calcified or, turn into minerals. Sometimes it can be used by the microbiology, but that's down there. But that's pretty much it when it comes to a septic system, is you're just using it like a big vat that you're containing your phosphorus in. And the problem with doing that is that that vat eventually will reach its full capacity and won't be able to hold the phosphorus anymore. So breakthrough in a standard system is inevitable. You can put a new system in, it'll remove phosphorus pretty well for a while, a standard Title V system in, and then inevitably you'll start to see breakthrough of that phosphorus. It'll get into the groundwater, and then it's going to do what it does, which is probably travel toward a pond or an embayment. Hopefully an embayment, because those aren't as sensitive to phosphorus. So when it comes to wastewater, if you can't just sewer the whole mess, and I know in Brewster here, sewer isn't really one of the big options that's on the table for your wastewater issues, but it is, you have some concerns about heading towards Pleasant Bay and so forth, so there are discussions about nitrogen mitigation in Brewster. One of the things I would suggest as that process moves forward is not to use your ponds for nitrogen mitigation. So when the bean counters are doing their math on how much nitrogen we need to remove, oftentimes they'll utilize a pond because a pond can function as a nitrogen sink. You can get up to 50% reduction in nitrogen loading just from a pond. But to me, that's a bad idea, because you're going to say, well, we don't have to do anything upstream of that pond with respect to wastewater, so we'll just let that go, and we solved our nitrogen problem. But obviously we haven't solved our phosphorus problem, which is why you folks are all here. The Board of Health can and should require inspection of all septic systems near the ponds. Board of Health is completely imbued legally to be able to require inspections of the septic system, so you can identify those that are failed, those that are older, find the cesspools. Finding the cesspools is really one of the best things that you could do, because cesspools, number one, have been in the ground for a long time, and number two, they don't do a whole lot for treatment regardless. So what you should do then is target replacement of those cesspools and the older systems that are up gradient of the pond first. So groundwater generally flows in one direction. You don't really need to target what's flowing away from the pond. Look at those systems first that are up gradient. And ideally, if you're able to replace those systems with phosphorus removal septic system technologies. And again, this is if you can't just sewer the whole mess. So phosphorus removal systems. So what are some of the pros and cons behind phosphorus removal systems? Well, the data that we've seen, they have the potential to remove large portions of the phosphorus. They do it by a variety of methods. Some of them do it electrically. They have these cool electric metal plates in there that turn phosphorus into various minerals. There are systems that actually use biological treatment, so bacteria uptaking phosphorus, and then you're actually removing the phosphorus by that route. There's some capability for phosphorus capture and reuse, and this is one of the more exciting things to me, because despite the fact that we have too much phosphorus in our ponds, we don't have, according to some of the calculations that are out there, a whole lot of phosphorus, mineable phosphorus left for us to use for our agricultural purposes. So if we're able to capture some of that phosphorus and reuse it, utilizing some of these technologies, or at our wastewater treatment plants, that's definitely something we should be pursuing. And some of the phosphorus removal technologies that are out there can also remove nitrogen. So a lot of these systems turn out that they're also in watersheds for the marine embayments, so you can get a twofer with some of these technologies. The big cons, though, right now is that we only have two what are called pilot-approved technologies in the state of Massachusetts right now. Because no place has really required phosphorus removal, there hasn't been a whole lot of push by these companies to come into the state and try to get approval to install them. So we only have two right now. And there's not a whole lot of data to confirm which of the technologies work the best. There are more than two technologies in the United States and in the world, it's just that they're not here, and we don't have the data to show how well they work. So the test center put together a grant project. We call it the Phosphorus Project. And the The goal of that particular project is first to install a variety of phosphorus removal technologies to try to attract those companies to come into the state and install their technologies so we can look at them and monitor them for the performance for 2 years at a minimum to determine how efficacious they are in phosphorus removal so that we can determine which are the best ones that could be applied in your pond watersheds. The outcomes of this, more technologies become available because more will be approved in the state and we'll have better data to identify which ones are the best. So we need volunteers, and you folks are great at volunteering. With this grant, George Hoyfelder, who is the director of the test center before me, and I believe has come and spoken to you folks at some point in the past, talked to a number of these technology vendors, and he's a pretty good salesman. I don't know if you know George, but he's a pretty good salesman. And he was able to secure about $150,000 in donated equipment from those companies. And that's about 10 to 12 installs worth or so. It's actually probably more than that. The grant will provide a $5,000 subsidy for the first taker of each technology. To try to sweeten the pot a little bit. Hopefully we can, get some people. They might be concerned, well, I'm getting donated technology. What about the engineering? What about the installation? The $5,000 subsidy can help cover some of that stuff. We'll be providing technical assistance to both the homeowner and the designer of the system. And we also provide 2 years of free monitoring because we're interested in seeing how these systems perform. So we need volunteers to get these systems in the ground so we can start to progress down this path. And, as I'm sure you're all aware, it's a pretty critical thing for us all to do is to, gain more phosphorus technologies. And I like to say put more tools in the toolbox. We need as many as we can possibly get. But it's important to remember really that replacing septic systems is only one part of the solution. And I'm going to come back to this list that I just, I showed you a few minutes ago because, as I said, septic systems is one bullet on this list. You have to look at, like I said, robust fertilizer restrictions. I don't think we do enough in that area. We put fertilizer on the ground and a lot of times it'll run off into the pond. Land use practices. This is one of the biggest ones to me. Don't cut the trees all the way down to the pond. I know you love the view. I hope none of you do that. But if you do, I would suggest trying to put some of that vegetation back to the extent possible because that's one of the best ways that you can mitigate water runoff getting into the pond and carrying phosphorus along with it. Do those septic system upgrades. Look at options like constructed wetlands, stormwater management, another major way of controlling it, and then some of those in-pond removal techniques. So I've got a few suggestions. I'm not the be-all, end-all of suggestions on ponds. I'm sure most of you folks are pretty aware of, most of these. But number one, stop with the fertilizer already. I love hydrangeas too, and they look great, but, maybe not fertilize them. Number two, stop with the lawns that run all the way to the water line. Again, you're just like creating a nice channel for phosphorus-laden rainwater to run right into the pond. And that does have a subsurface impact too because the roots uptake phosphorus on its way through the soil. Number three, stop using ponds to mitigate nitrogen. And that's that thing that I was talking about before, which is as we're developing our plans to deal with nitrogen, stop using the ponds for nitrogen mitigation. Number three, stop putting in traditional Title V systems. This is the part where hopefully the grant can help out in getting those new technologies available so that you can stop putting in those traditional Title V systems. Number five, start considering a holistic approach, which I think, that's the direction you're definitely headed in with some of the projects that you've got going on. So keep doing that. Take that holistic approach. Look at septic systems. Look at fertilizer regulations. Look at, controlling the removal of trees down to the water line. Take that holistic approach because that's the best way to get to where you need to be. Number six, there is no magic pill. Anybody who tells you that is just a snake oil salesman. It's not going to be just one thing that fixes your ponds. You're not going to just throw something in and all the phosphorus is going to go away and the algae is going to go away. You've got to look at it in that holistic approach. And number seven, move with urgency but not with haste. In other words, we got to start to act now, but be patient because even if, as an example, we removed all the septic systems today and completely shut off the wastewater flow, it's still going to take decades for that phosphorus to work its way out of the system and work its way out of the pond. So you're going to have to be patient, but that doesn't mean sit on your hands and not do anything. So move with urgency, but not with haste. So the end, or is that just the beginning? And there we are. So if anybody has any questions or anything like that, I would add before that real quick, I wanted to add at the end of my list of excesses, obviously excess humidity today. Holy cow. I'm going to need a shower after this. So questions? Yes?
Yeah, how does the hyacinth and the duckweed contribute to beneficial results?
So those are two of the fastest growing plants on the planet. I think maybe second or third to kudzu in the southern part of the country. Hyacinth is a bigger concern down in the southern area because it'll choke off a harbor in a matter of days. It grows so quickly, and when it's going through that growth, it'll uptake nutrients with it because that's what it's utilizing to grow. It'll utilize nitrogen and phosphorus. So we think there's some potential there to be able to use water hyacinth as a means of removing these things. You'd have to be careful because it is an invasive species. You'd have to be really careful and considerate about how you engineer a system to utilize that in our area. One of the nice things about hyacinth is that it won't persist year to year in our climate. It's just too cold for it. It'll die off. It can't reseed the next year, so you would have to physically add more hyacinth to whatever system after the winter. The other species we're looking at are the duckweeds, which I said are these minuscule little plants, but again, one of the fastest growing plants in the world as a means of uptake of nitrogen and phosphorus. And there's been some research. I've actually learned that duckweed is like one of the most researched and hot topics in the world of plant biology right now, because not only can it uptake phosphorus and nitrogen, but it's also usable as a compost. It's usable as animal feed. It's got a bunch of great nutrients. They're actually looking at it for growth on the International Space Station because it produces this special compound that you can't really grow any other way. So they're working on how you can utilize duckweed in space. So those are a couple of the possibilities, I think. You know, we're starting some initial research. Susan, you came out and saw some of what we have set up there. You know, we're in the very early stages of kind of tinkering around with some of these ideas, but I think there's some potential in some of those.
Where do composting toilets fit into this scheme?
Composting toilets, I think, are a great solution. I personally love the idea of a composting toilet because you're taking care of it at the source. The biggest problem with composting toilet is acceptance of composting toilets. People don't want them in their house, as we've found. Down in Falmouth, we offered the town of Falmouth, in a joint project with the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment, we put together a project that offered a $10,000 subsidy for people to install composting toilets in their house. I don't think they got any takers. I don't know why. Some of the new composting technologies are pretty cool. You have a thing upstairs that looks pretty much like your toilet that you're familiar with, and then there's a unit down in the basement that you go down and crank a thing on every so often. So I think they hold a lot of promise, and I think, you know, they could be a major part of the solution, but again, it's that acceptance. That's a really steep hill to climb. I mean, like IA systems are a pretty steep hill because of some of the additional costs. Composting toilets are like, that's still like trying to run up the stairs in front of the building in Philadelphia when Rocky runs up. Down in the blue.
I have actually a couple questions. The
Sure.
first one is, say you live a third of a mile or so from a pond.
Mhm.
Is your septic system and other water use an issue at that point for a pond? And the second question is related to that is there an average figure for the Cape about how deep the groundwater is in terms of how deep you have to go in order to get drinking water, public drinking water?
So the first question as to how far away, that's like an engineering problem. And that's a good question for a hydrogeologist because it's not just as simple as saying a third of a mile is a good measure, or 300 feet or 100 feet, because it depends on how fast the groundwater flows through the ground. Depends on some of the characteristics of the groundwater, how acidic it is, because that can impact how quickly phosphorus travels through. So I wish it was a nice cut and dry thing like saying, oh, you're a third of a mile away, yeah, you should do something. That would require some sort of an engineering study to figure out what that threshold should be. As for the second question, the depth of groundwater, that ranges all over the place on the Cape. At the test center where we are, which is on the moraine, groundwater is like 70, 80 feet down below where we are. But if you go up into Eastham, it's it's way up near the surface. You know, you start to see mounded systems out in Eastham, and they've actually required alternative systems in Eastham because they don't have enough groundwater separation out there. So it's like, it's a huge range in groundwater depth. You're welcome. Oh, in the back there?
Yeah, just a question, just relating to his last topic. Do you know a guy named Ken Foreman?
Ken Foreman down from, yeah, in Falmouth. He works with
Biology
Hui.
lab.
Yep.
I had a chance to have lunch with him, not for this reason, but he's doing a study right now where he's actually monitoring groundwater after a sewage system is installed and septics are disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been working on that for the last couple of years.
Yep.
And I think his study is just in Falmouth and Woods Hole.
Right.
But he mentioned that it takes 3 to 4 years. Basically, he hasn't drawn his final conclusion yet, but it took 3 to 4 years for the aquifer to adjust to sewering and for septic systems to, finally leach through the
Right.
aquifer.
Right, right. You know, I think, again, that's going to depend on distance from whatever measuring point you're talking about, because there are points in the central part of the Cape Cod, like in the center of Joint Base Cape Cod, where if you look at the groundwater flow models, it's like 100 years before that ever reaches an embayment. So, there's a huge amount of variability in that. Even if we shut off all the septic systems tomorrow, we're still going to have that 100-year load coming through. So it's going to take a long time for these measures to take strong effect. I mean, we're not going to just flip a switch on the treatment plant one day and we're all going to celebrate because the ponds and the embayments are all cleaned up. But that's interesting that Ken's doing that research. We're involved with a project with the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. They have a project set up near Shubal Pond in Barnstable where we're going to be installing 15 to 20 alternative septic systems in a compact area in a neighborhood. And the US EPA and USGS have actually teamed up with us, and they've installed groundwater monitoring wells around this whole neighborhood so that we can actually see the impact of installing these systems. So we've done some preliminary measurements. The systems actually started going in last week, so then we'll start getting data following that, and we'll be able to see really in real time how long that impact might take. So that might help inform along with the work that Ken's doing as well.
Could you describe in a practical sense for like a homeowner with a Title V, what is an alternative? What we're talking about, if you did a retrofit to some magical new system, what's that mean? You dig the whole Title V up, you start with new land? How does this alternative work?
Well, fortunately, there's a whole lot of different ways you can actually do it. So to kind of run through some of the technologies that are involved in the grant, and I'm going to actually put this down because I like to talk with my hands a little bit. That's kind of so there's what's called a Fuji Clean system. So that's a company that's based in Japan. Their system is a single tank unit that could actually just replace your septic tank. And I'm working in a project for one of these installations in Centerville where they have an existing Title V system that's in good condition. They've got a septic tank and a leach field that follows immediately after. So what we're going to do is basically take this Fuji Clean unit, drop it in next to the septic tank, pipe into it, pipe back into the existing leach field, and that's it. That's the system. There's a technology called Waterloo Ecp, which involves, and there's actually one installed in Brewster here, in Cranview Road, I think it is.
Z-Buns.
Yep. That system is where you put electrically charged plates inside of a septic tank, and then it precipitates the phosphorus out in the leach field in a mineral form, in the form of what's called vivianite, struvite, or a couple of the mineral forms of phosphorus.
You put it right in the same septic tank?
Yep, it can go, in the septic, in the second port of the septic tank is an option.
What you can do is that on an existing qualified facility, you're going to dig down, put these plates in, electrified plates.
Yep, and then you have a control panel and, yep, exactly. The plates need to be replaced on occasion, but yeah.
What would be like total cost of such a thing? We're talking 10,000, 100,000?
We have I don't have them off the top of my head. We have a list of these on our website. MASSTC.org is our website. We have a lot of information about the Phosphorus Project and each of the technologies, and it spells out what the cost would be if you were just purchasing it.
I would recommend we do a jump link from our website, website to your website.
Sure. Yeah, we can
Thing and jump it so
we can provide the link to that. Be happy to. Some of the other technologies, there's one called Phosphorid, which is from Pio Lombardo, who's out in on the outer part of the Cape. That technology, again, uses electrical plates, but instead of precipitating in the leach field, he has what's called a sacrificial filter that's able to collect the phosphorus. And to me, that's kind of cool because you could, in theory, grab the phosphorus there and do some reuse of phosphorus from that. There's a couple of other technologies. There's one called phosphorphade, which is like a biologically mediated type of technology. And then the last two are to utilize soil as our phosphorus removal. And I talked a lot about the breakthrough and those types of things, but the difference with these soil treatment technologies is it gets the dispersal of the wastewater up near the surface. Because one of the biggest mistakes that we've made with our wastewater in Cape Cod is we've dug down to the best sand we could find because we can get rid of it the quickest, and we let it fly, and that does minimal for treatment. What these systems do is it keeps the wastewater up in the upper soil horizons where all the bacteria that typically do work for us in mediating our wastewater live. And you can also get plant uptake when you're in those upper soil horizons. And in addition to that, the soil in those areas just has more capacity for holding phosphorus. So there's two technologies that we're going to be doing. One's called Geomat, and the other is a drip dispersal system, which folks use in their gardens all the time, except it's subsurface, to see if that's a potential. And that would be like a full leach field replacement type of a thing. So if you had a failed leach field, that might be a good option for somebody in that case. You have a new Title V, maybe you go with the Fuji Clean or with the Waterloo Ecp. So we, like I said, we're always trying to get as many tools in the toolbox because we need a diverse set of tools to be able to solve some of the problems. So I hope that.
Yeah, just a comment, if you saw the hands that raised, we all have septic systems.
Yep.
We wouldn't be part of the Ponds Coalition if we weren't motivated and caring.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's a way that we can work with you as pond people and be motivated to maybe supply some of our septic systems, a lot of which are right near ponds.
That would be great.
Figure out which ones would make sense to do something on, and then if we can't be a guinea pig of some sort.
Well, that's what we're looking for. We need guinea pigs. So I'll give Susan the information that you can all connect with our staff. Emily Michelle Olmstead is one of my staff members who really sort of runs the program, but we're all sort of working on, we're a small team, so we all work on everything. But yeah, we'd love to work with you because I know, that's one of the reasons I was really interested in coming here and talking with you folks, because we happen to have this project and you also happen to have the ponds. So I think it could work out well. Thank you. Yes.
As a follow-up to that, are you in the position to come out and assess which option seems to be best for a particular property?
We can assist in that regard, yeah. Anybody who's interested, if you can get the, or we can help get the as-built from the town health department. We have a good relationship with Amy Von Hoen. I've known her since the start of my career. So we can usually, work and get that information. We can come out to the property and go over some of the options with you so that you can make the best decision that'll work for you, the best system that'll work for you.
I just wondered if you could maybe tell us what the 3 best behaviors that we should change to, obviously fertilizing is a big thing, but maybe there's things that we could do just in our home to stop it getting into the system to begin.
Okay, so when it comes, let me give you 3 tips to your septic system. Number 1, don't use garbage grinders. If you have a garbage grinder, and you probably don't, get rid of it because you're putting excess food into the system and that contributes to your leach field not functioning the best it can. Number 2, scrape your plates into the trash and don't put grease down the drain. Grease is like one of the worst things that you can put down the drain. And that applies whether you're on a septic system or if you're on a wastewater treatment plant. The grease gets into the lines, it gums everything up. Just horrible, horrible stuff. If you've ever seen any articles about fatbergs, which are like these hundreds of kilogram wads of fat and grease and nasty stuff in sewer lines that takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to clear in a sewer system. So don't put the grease down the drain. Put it in a cup, let it solidify, put it in the trash. Number 3, I had 3. Let me think of the third one. I got so off on that. Wipes, disposable wipes. They say flushable, not flushable. Do not flush the wipes. So those are 3 just simple things of not putting stuff down the drain that'll keep your system, even if it's a Title V system, the best thing you can do is keep it functioning as good as you can until you can do something better. Those are 3 really simple things you can do to keep that system running as long as possible.
You mentioned earlier a loan program.
Yep.
What are the length and terms of that?
So that loan program it'll cover the full cost of the project. So everything from engineering to putting the grass back the way it was. So that program it's a 5% loan right now. We're looking at ways of perhaps reducing the interest rate because a lot of towns are going to start to use systems in a more concerted way, so we're trying to provide some incentives. But right now it's 5%. It's a 20-year loan. And it's really it's a simple and it's a low-cost way of financing these things. So, yes.
So just to enhance your list a little bit, I would think that personal products, our laundry detergents, our soap detergents, anything that goes down the drain, look out for phosphates especially.
Phosphates, yeah, definitely look for phosphates. And really just generally speaking, the chemicals that we use on a day-to-day basis and the soaps we use, just put some thought into it. I'm not the kind of person who's going to stand here and say, don't use soap, don't take showers.
Right.
I take showers every day myself, so just be cognizant of what you're doing and try to think about ways that you can maybe slowly eliminate those things from your life as to the extent possible, or as time goes on and there are better options, maybe look at those better options that are less impactful on the environment. Oh, right there.
Just curious about the foam that appears on shoreline when there's a good southwest wind and the temperatures at a certain level. They're usually pretty high and that foam goes up and the kids put it all over their heads. Is that a sign of phosphorus or something else?
It definitely can be a sign of increase. I mean, they need nutrients to grow. They need nutrients, they need sunlight, they need the water, obviously. And they need the temperature to grow. So you're kind of creating a perfect storm this time of the year because it gets warm, there's a lot of sun, you start to get mixing in the water column that's pulling up more phosphorus from the bottom. That's definitely a big part of it. I'm going to guess that that's probably like Spirogyra, that particular one. It creates these really fine threads, essentially, and then the oxygen bubbles get trapped in it as it comes out from underneath and kind of creates this foamy mess of stuff. I'm not an algae expert by any means, but that's kind of my gut feeling as to what that could be.
I had a second part of the question.
Sure.
Years ago, the state would come in to reclaim all the trout ponds in the Cape. They stocked probably 15 or 20 of our ponds with trout. And when they first started this program, they used a chemical called rotenone to kill all the fish, all the animals in the pond. And then sometime later, they would come back when that chemical had dissipated somewhat. And then they would stock it with just trout. Fisherman's paradise. You're going to catch a fish, you're going to catch a trout. Now that the ponds are no longer treated that way, and I'm just wondering if the rotenone had any long-term effects that we should be aware of.
Well, I'm not a fisheries guy. I'm not familiar enough with the longevity of that particular compound. That's a horrible way of doing things. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate that that's the way they chose to do it. But yeah, I'm not familiar enough with that particular compound to say how long it would last. Yes.
I just wanted to pass along another tip. For $6, I bought these 2 little sink strainers that you replace your regular drain with these strainers, and I am just amazed at the amount of food particles that you collect and that you just, throw away or put in your compost, and it doesn't go down into your septic system.
Yeah, those
$6.
are fantastic. I have one myself. It drives my wife crazy. Sometimes she pulls it out. We have a little bit of a fight where I put it back in and she when it gets full. But yeah, it's a great way of keeping that food. It's again, that's a great thing you can do because it increases the longevity of your system. It just generally it's not like it's going to magically make everything better, but it's like one of those little things that you can do that has so little impact on your life that it just makes sense to do. Yeah, I love that suggestion. Thank you. All right. think I've exhausted all the questions. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for
Thank you, Brian. That was really wonderful. Well, we're getting to the end of the meeting, and I just want to make sure, if you haven't heard it enough yet, thank you very much, members and volunteers, for helping to support our mission. It's very important work we're doing, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you. And I just a few statistics. This organization has really grown in the last few years, and I think there are a lot of reasons for it. I think one is communications. We not only have our own communications that we send to homeowners, like the Ripples magazine and the Pond Guide and e-newsletters, but we're also getting into the news a lot. Marty keeps getting interviewed. They're just, the local newspapers are just being wonderful talking about our work, and that really helps. And maybe that's one of the reasons then that our donations have increased tremendously. In 2019, our donations were $31,000. In 2021, $64,000 in 2 years. Our total donors are now up to 426 donors in this past membership drive. We 2 years ago we had no business partners. Now we have 10.
That's you. You.
Wow. We also, our mailing list now has grown to about 800 people. So the Brewster Ponds Coalition, we have a voice, and we can work together, and we can make some progress. So thank you all very, very much for coming today. I guess I need to officially adjourn the meeting. But
Thank you, Susan, for the leadership and just for your enlightenment and everything that you have given us.
thank you for coming.